It's almost undeniable the enormous progress South Korea has undergone in the last 60 years. From being one of the most impoverished countries to becoming known for its technological prowess and ruthless educational system just within 60 years. South Korea is continuously raising the bar for what most countries deem attainable, but it does so at the expense of its own people's well-being. With an endless cycle of suicide, sexual assault, rape, cultural decay, and educational imprisonment under a monopolistic dominated economy within the grasp of a few oligarchies, South Korea has undergone and still undergoes sacrifices worth thousands to maintain its illusion of progress. The country that was once a family-ingrained society has become a Squid Game dystopia whereby everyone is overtly suppressing each other in a battle for survival. In a vicious cycle to determine who's the best man, every family must ruthlessly compete in order to be in total servitude to a handful of conglomerates. And from the age of 5, South Koreans are forced to embark on a long and gruesome journey. Little did they know, they were walking into a death trap. In 1960, Korea was one of the poorest nations to exist. In desperation to transform its fortunes, the government devised a 5-year plan, a plan to catapult the economy into modernity. But with no one capable enough to realize the plan, political leaders turned to industrialists, usually called chaebol. A chaebol is a monopolistic conglomerate that dominates multiple industries in South Korea and is usually controlled by dynastic families or selected individuals. Using the chaebols granted the government room to implement policies while designating capital and plans for expansion to the chaebols. In a mere blink of an eye, South Korea had transformed into a standalone powerhouse and emerged as one of the fastest growing countries in technology. But this quickly formed monopolistic oligarchies with a total control of 80% of the country's GDP and Samsung having a lion's stake of 20%. This created a horrifying system where the chaebols wielded immense power and are often caught committing atrocious crimes only to be pardoned on a holiday called Liberation Day. With such a monopolistic society, everyone is aggressively competing to work for just a handful of conglomerates. As early as kindergarten, kids are pressured and imprisoned with the mentality that not working for one of these companies could spell doom. The companies with this much influence are Samsung, Hyundai, and LG Electronics. The only goal for the young ones is to become servants of these mighty corporations. But in order to get a job in these corporations, students must school at one of the top prestigious schools in South Korea. Admissions into these schools weren't based on merit, but rather on grades in comparison to the next person. Let me explain. In a class of 12, there must be a failure. You are only considered an A+ student if your result is better than everyone else, disregarding whether you did well or not. So no matter how everyone studies hard, there must always be someone at the bottom, someone to fail and be condemned by the society. And to get into a prestigious school, only the top 4% of students are considered, the rest are meaningless. This creates a very competitive and harsh environment, whereby you're only as good as your nearest competitor. Kids now find joy in one another's downfall, and no one helps anyone, as that might jeopardize their own chances of getting into one of these colleges. With so much competition, students now study for a gruesome 16 hours a day, all in preparation for an examination that has a 2% success rate. During this examination, the world for Koreans is practically on a halt. Airplanes don't take off or land. Cars in the surrounding areas are non-existent, and even the teachers wear trainers to silence their footsteps. What pains me the most is the societal and cultural mantra called hagwon. This is when students take extra 10-hour lessons every day, even during holidays. Parents spend $20 billion per year for their kids to attend hagwons. To emphasize how vigorously hagwon is taken, an ad went viral last year belonging to a mother of a student, stating that she would pay someone to wake her son up every time he sleeps. In her own words, "I am looking for someone to wake my son up at a study cafe. All you have to do is sit next to him and wake him up when he falls asleep. If you feel he needs to sleep, let him sleep for 15 minutes, then wake him up. Please check to see if he gets 10 minutes of rest every hour and if he studies after his rest." At this point, one can't help but wonder whether it's the country's elites that pushes such an agenda, or the sinister design of the system, or even Korea's own people and culture. But one thing is clear, it's all for the purpose of enhancing the dominance of these corporate creatures, and more importantly, ensnaring the youths in a relentless cycle of mental torture. Their freedom, time and energy robbed, preventing them from contemplating and transcending the tactical hell of society. But this is not where this dystopic society ends. Failing to enter such prestigious colleges has some extremely detrimental effects on the individual, socially and mentally. Those who do not attain this goal are seen as lower-class citizens and are generally treated with less regard than those who do. They equally suffer diminishing marriage prospect and a lower probability of securing a respectable white-collar job. This constant pressure from society and lack of social life has led many young students to the edge of depression, resulting in South Korea having the highest suicide rates in the world. There's a sense of despair and dread from the students once the harsh reality of Korea's educational system catches up with them. There is a constant stream of anxiety and uncertainty as they contemplate what unkind reality their future holds and if they could ever survive this societal hunger game. Nevertheless, the majority of parents send their kids to Seoul to complete their studies. This is mostly due to the fact that Seoul is practically the center of attention in South Korea and has the best of everything: schools, hospitals, food, houses, jobs, you name it. But they all come at quite a heap cost. One major crisis that has been mentioned over the years is the rising cost of houses in Seoul. It makes it almost impossible for the average family to survive. The average home in Seoul costs about 912 million won. But quite ironically, this housing crisis mostly began from the rise of competition in the economy. Every parent wanted his or her kids to have an edge in the society, and some parents would forego their entire life savings just for their kids to school in Seoul. This inflated the prices of houses rapidly and further aggravates the pressure on the child to succeed. New couples are now forced to budget more than $1 million in order to start a family. This has made the thought of marriage extremely repulsive to many young adults. Everyone looking for a better life for their child must stay in Seoul, or at least send their kids there, or risk the child being left behind by his peers, and possibly hindering the survival of future generations. But many parents have been able to break out of the entrapment of society and see the bigger picture. South Korea is one of many countries with good education, job opportunities, or even marriage prospects. But there's just one barrier confining most families to the society: English. A staggering statistic reveals that only a mere 10% of South Koreans possess fluency in English. Many citizens are forced to bear the brunt of South Korea mainly due to this divide. Their job opportunities, marriage prospects, and even friend groups all dwindle outside the entrapment of society. The ability to speak English alone opens up multiple doors to the common folk in South Korea. This realization has increased the demand for English teachers, and many parents are willing to forgo more money just for their kids to be taught English. Unfortunately, only Hagwons teach and speak English, forcing many parents to pay for the exorbitant fees required to attend these extra lessons. The most popular job for a foreigner in South Korea is to become an English teacher in any Hagwon. Multiple Hagwons ads are published every day in order to draw in foreign English teachers. But once they have been recruited, they are trapped in a web of exploitation and deprived of their very own freedom as well as personal well-being. Many of the foreigners who work there complain about racism.
Again, I'd have conversations on the phone, on Skype, and they'd kind of be like, where do you want to be located? Great CV, what kind of pay are you looking for? And I'd say da 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 da. And they'd say, you're not going to be in Seoul. The Seoul schools don't want black people.
Sexual assault.
It was my first year in Korea. I had no idea how to go about reporting it. I had no idea what my rights were. I had no idea what I could do. And I was a teacher at the time. So that experience just kind of went under the rug, and I just never, ever spoke about it after that. And I told him, I'm sorry, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sleep. And he ignored that request. And eventually he pinned me down onto the bed with force. And he started to do his thing. And I said, please, if you're going to do this, please use protection. I said, please use protection. And he ignored my request to use protection. And 1 month later, I became pregnant. There was no way that I was going to bring a child into the world under such circumstances. And that situation changed my life completely.
As if that's not enough, they are further deprived of the basic right to quit their jobs willingly.
To basically find my own replacement and pay $2,000 for my employer to release me from my contract. Because in Korea, you can't just quit your job as a foreigner. If you quit, your employer is not entitled to release you at all. They don't gotta do a damn thing. You can leave, you cannot work again until your contract ends.
Most employees aren't even allowed to look for help or call out the employers publicly due to South Korea's unreasonable strong defamation lawsuit. Foreigners are left to their own means of survival, and it's either adapt or die trying. If you were quite attentive, you'll notice a pattern here. Most of these reports seem to come more from women. From all of my research, I hardly encountered male figures who were subjugated to the dreadful antipathy towards migrants in South Korea. It started to become obvious that something darker has been left uncovered. So I dug deeper, and what I found out was hidden in plain sight. South Korea seems to have a culturally accepted wayward view towards women that subjugates them to a lower hierarchy than men. It's so bad that outside child expenses, some women forgo having children due to the fact that there's this stigma that once a woman has a child, her career life should be over. This, coupled with the rising expenses of starting a family, is affecting South Korea massively, leading to the lowest levels of birth rate in the developed world and has the highest age population than any other country in the OECD. With marriage declining steadily and many young adults having no plans to marry, South Korea has become the hub for multiple sexual assaults. In trains, buses, roadside clubs, or even subways, sexual predators are actively searching to encroach their next victim. Multiple reports from women are rampant in South Korea, but are repeatedly neglected. Although ads in their subway state the penalties for crimes like this, South Korea is known for its little to no penalties and lack of willpower towards sexual assault crimes. This has emboldened predators to the extent of lowering their phones to record a female's underwear. Even in bathrooms, subways, schools, spas, and countless others, there are hidden cameras in every corner with a predator behind them recording and targeting his next victim. This disgusting behavior has put a veil around almost every young man in South Korea, generalizing them into the same group as these male predators. But even the government's policies fail to reprimand vile and erroneous acts like this. It's fairly known in South Korea that non-consensual sex isn't seen as rape. It is only regarded as rape if it involves violence or intimidation. So young girls who were manipulated under the influence or unable to resist and were taken advantage of have to silently wallow in a lonely despair of shame and helplessness. But at the end of it all, at the end of this long, tortuous and meaningless journey, one comes to terms with death at Tapgol Park, the symbol of elderly poverty in downtown Seoul, frequented by crowds of seniors who gather to kill time and eat free lunch dispensed by charity organizations. At the end of it all, you sacrifice everything, but you get nothing. Capitalism at its peak.